A monk, living in a brothel? That's not a story you hear in Dharma talks. He didn't chant in temples or sit in caves. He meditated where lust and pain intertwined. While others preached purity from pedestals, he brought compassion to the most impure place. People called him a fraud, a disgrace. But he never defended himself. He just sat still, in the heart of chaos. What was he doing there? Had he fallen from the path, or had he gone deeper than anyone else dared? This is the story of a monk who chose the unthinkable. Not for pleasure, not for power, but to practice true compassion, where no one else would go. The street was narrow, lit dimly by flickering red lanterns. Laughter, coarse and hollow, spilled from wooden doors that never closed. Perfumed air mingled with smoke, and shadows danced behind thin curtains. This was not a place for prayer. This was a brothel. But there he was, in the corner, sitting cross-legged on a tattered mat, wearing a faded saffron robe. Silent, still, watching, but not judging. He didn't speak. He didn't move. And he didn't leave. People noticed him quickly. Who wouldn't? A monk in a place of sin. The regular customers sneered. The workers laughed. Half mocking, half curious. Some thought he was insane. Others thought he was hiding something. A scandal. Perhaps. A fall from grace. Rumors spread like fire. He's not a real monk. He came here for the girls. He must have been expelled from his temple. But the monks said nothing. For days. Then weeks. He sat in silence. Morning and night. He remained among them, unmoving, unshaken. He never touched the women. Never accepted money. Never ate what was offered in flirtation. He just bowed his head gently when greeted, and closed his eyes when insulted. The brothel madam, a sharp-tongued woman named Lean, tried to throw him out. "This is not a place for monks," she snapped. "You make the customers nervous. You make the girls confused." But the monk only bowed and said softly, "Then let me sit outside." And he did. Right at the threshold. Rain or sun, cold or heat. He sat, uninvited, unafraid. Over time, something strange began to happen. The girls, who once mocked him, began to watch him. At first with amusement, then with questions. One asked, "Why are you here?" He simply smiled. "Because you are." Another asked, "Aren't you ashamed?" He looked into her tired eyes and said, "No more than the world should be." This was no ordinary monk. He didn't recite scriptures or lecture about karma. He didn't ask anyone to change. He only sat, and listened, and watched with eyes that didn't desire, didn't judge, didn't flinch. But the town didn't see wisdom. They saw scandal. One evening, a group of villagers gathered outside the brothel. They shouted. Some threw stones. One man yelled, "You shame the robe. Get out." But the monk didn't move. He just folded his hands in prayer and bowed his head. Someone snapped a photo. It went viral. The prostitute monk. Headlines read, "A disgrace to Buddhism." Monks from nearby temples were outraged. Elders convened to investigate. Religious groups demanded his removal. "He defiles the path," they said. "He must be expelled." But the monk remained silent. And as the world grew louder around him, inside that small, chaotic brothel, something quieter began to take root. Long before the brothel, he was known as Venerable Sumantra, the silent flame of the Eastern monastery. Disciples traveled for weeks just to sit near him. He radiated stillness. He fasted for days, meditated for hours without moving. He was praised as the embodiment of discipline and detachment. Elders whispered that he was close to enlightenment. Yet the monk himself never spoke of attainment. He would often say, "Stillness is not escape. Peace is not absence." Then one day, everything changed. He was returning from alms round when he passed a narrow alley in the city. There, hidden in the shadows, a young girl was crying. Her face was bruised, her lipstick smeared. She couldn't have been older than 16. Their eyes met. She flinched, not from shame, but from the reflex of someone too used to being hit, dismissed, used. The monk didn't say a word. He simply bowed to her, his palms pressed together. She stared, stunned. No man had ever bowed to her. The next day, he returned to that alley. She was gone. But others were there. Girls too young for such despair. They joked with strangers, but their eyes were empty. And behind them stood the brothel, its walls painted bright, its insides dark. It wasn't the building that disturbed him. It was the stench of hopelessness. He went back to the monastery, shaken. That night, during meditation, his breath trembled. He saw the girl's eyes, hollow and frightened. He asked himself, what good is my peace if it cannot reach her? For weeks, he sat with the question. Other monks noticed his restlessness. One elder warned him, attachment hides behind noble intentions. But Sumatra replied, is compassion still attachment if it asks for nothing? One dawn, he left the monastery without ceremony. He left behind his bowl, his cushion, his robes, except for the one he wore. No explanation, no farewell, just a silent walk toward the city. By sunset, he arrived at the brothel door. He didn't knock. He simply sat beside the steps and closed his eyes. For hours, for days, until the madam shouted at him, until the girls mocked him, until they grew tired of mocking and just watched. That's how it began. He never asked to enter. They let him in because he wouldn't leave. He took the darkest place in the house, the storage room near the back, where no one went. No bed, just floorboards. No chants, just breath. No sermons, just presence. In the beginning, even he doubted. Was this ego in disguise? Was he trying to be a savior? But each time doubt arose. He looked into their eyes, the same hollow stare he saw in the alley. And each time, he knew, this was where the Dharma needed to be. He remembered the words of the Buddha, go where the suffering is, not where it's safe, not where it's easy, but where it's needed. So he stayed, not because he belonged to them, but because no one else had ever chosen to. Tea was a place of noise, perfume, laughter, bargaining, footsteps that echoed up thin wooden stairs. Men came and went. Some smelled of liquor, some of regret. The walls, once bright red, had faded to a dull, tired pink. Mirrors cracked, makeup smeared. Behind every door, a transaction. And yet, in the farthest corner, silence bloomed. The monk made his home in the storage room. No one ever asked him to move. No one offered him comfort. And he never asked for any. He woke before dawn, swept the common floor, lit a candle, and sat. When the girls returned from their clients, tired, drained, some in tears, he was still sitting, breathing, watching, but never judging. At first, they ignored him. Then they mocked him. You're not a real monk, one girl said, blowing smoke in his face. A real monk wouldn't be here. He coughed, smiled, and said nothing. Another dropped her robe in front of him, daring him to look. He didn't. She waited. He still didn't. She cursed and stormed off. But the next night, she sat across from him and asked quietly, why don't you hate us? That's when the change began. He didn't teach the Dharma in words. He didn't quote sutras or speak of past lives. He just listened, really listened. When a girl cried after being slapped by a client, he offered her silence, not pity, not solutions, just presence. When another confessed she hadn't seen her child in years, he folded a paper crane and gave it to her. No explanation, just a symbol. Gradually, their laughter softened. Their makeup changed, less like masks, more like art. They began to sit near him, just to breathe. One night, Lean, the madam, sat down beside him. She whispered, I used to pray when I was a girl. Then life got louder. He looked at her and replied, "The silence is still there. It never left." And then came the tea. One girl brought him a cup, steaming, sweet, simple. "I don't know what monks drink," she said. He accepted it with both hands. That moment, small and quiet, was revolutionary. Not because of the tea, but because of what it meant. They saw him not as a stranger, not as a threat, but as someone who had chosen to see them. He didn't preach abstinence. He didn't demand change. He never asked them to leave. But slowly, they began to change anyway, not because they were told to, but because they remembered something buried deep, their own worth. Some began to meditate with him. At first just for fun. Then for peace. They giggled when their legs cramped or when their minds wandered. He never corrected them. Just breathe. He would say, "That's enough." One girl brought her friend from another house. "He's not like other monks," she said. "He doesn't try to fix you. He just makes you feel real." Soon, they began to ask him questions about karma, about pain, about whether people like them could ever be forgiven. He would answer softly, "There's nothing to forgive. You are not your past. You are not what was done to you. You are not what you had to do to survive." In a place built on illusion and transaction, the monk offered the one thing no one else had: genuine presence. No expectations. No demands. Just stillness. And in that stillness, the brothel, brick by brick, breath by breath, began to change. Not in its structure, but in its soul. It was only a matter of time before the outside world noticed. A monk in a brothel was too scandalous to stay hidden forever. One evening, a man came to the brothel, not for pleasure, but for proof. A local businessman, self-proclaimed protector of morality, phone in hand. He filmed the monk sitting quietly among the girls, zoomed in on the robes, the candles, the smiles. He posted the video with one caption, "The Fall of Buddhism." It spread like wildfire. Within hours, monks from nearby temples were calling for investigation. Facebook groups exploded with debates. Some called him a saint. Most called him a disgrace. He's defiling the robe. He's seducing the weak under the name of compassion. He's the devil in disguise. Letters were written. Demands issued. Senior monks arrived in person. They stood in front of the brothel with cameras rolling, reporters swarming. They knocked hard, and when Lene opened the door, they pushed past her. They found the monk sitting, eyes closed, surrounded by 3 women in silence. No incense, no chanting, just presence. The senior monk pointed. "You. What are you doing here?" The monk slowly opened his eyes. He didn't flinch. "This is a place of sin." One elder spat. "You dishonor the path. You dishonor the robe. Come with us. Now." The brothel girls moved to shield him. One cried, "He's done more for us than any temple ever did." Another shouted, "You want to save us? Where were you before he came?" The room trembled, not from noise, but from truth. The elders were furious. He's manipulated them. They're under his spell. They threatened to strip him of ordination. "You will be defrocked. You are no longer a monk." Still, he did not argue. He stood up slowly, bowed deeply, and said, "If the robe keeps me from compassion, I'll remove it." Then, without drama, he took off the upper part of his robe and folded it, laying it gently at their feet. Gasps filled the room. One elder turned away in disgust. "You're lost." But the monk replied, "If being lost means sitting with the unloved, then I never want to be found." That night, the brothel held a vigil, not with incense or scriptures, but with silence. The girls lit candles, not for religion, for respect. Outside, people protested. Inside, people healed. They weren't saints. They didn't become nuns. But they began to change, in ways no doctrine could predict. One woman stopped charging her youngest clients. "They remind me of my son," she said. Another cut her hair short and took night classes in secret. "He said I was more than this," she whispered. A third stopped wearing makeup for a week. not in protest, but to see if she could look in the mirror and not feel shame. They didn't leave the brothel all at once, but they began to make choices, real choices, not the ones made from desperation or survival, but from awareness. The monk, now robeless, nameless, just him, didn't ask them to change. He just showed them what it looked like to sit with pain without running from it, and so they followed, not out of obedience, but because, for the first time, they believed they were worthy of peace. Lean, the madam, closed the brothel one night a week. For silence, she said. No money, no men, just us. They called it Stillness Night. They sat in a circle. No makeup, no masks. They didn't chant. They breathed, and they listened to themselves and to each other. One of the girls, who had once laughed the loudest, now taught the others how to meditate. Another began writing letters to her daughter she hadn't seen in years. She didn't send them. She just wrote. Something was shifting. Not holiness, not morality, but dignity. The kind that blooms when someone finally tells you, without words, that you matter. He never stayed too long in one place. That was his way, even before the brothel. But now, something told him it was time to go. There was no announcement, no goodbye speech. Just one morning, before sunrise, he folded his blanket, swept the floor, and left the storage room as he had found it, bare and still. When the girls woke, he was gone. Lean found a note by the candle he always lit. It said only, "Where love is needed, I will be." Some wept, some cursed him for leaving, but deep down, they understood. He was never theirs to keep. He had not come to save them. He had come to sit with them, until they remembered how to stand. Weeks later, stories spread. A man in old robes, walking barefoot through rough villages, sitting with orphans, beggars, prisoners, never preaching, never staying, just being, completely. Religious leaders still debated his heresy. Temples refused to speak his name. But in the brothel, every woman knew he had been more monk without a title than most with one. Years passed. Some women left the trade, some didn't. But all remembered the silence, the stillness, the way he looked at them as if they were already whole. And whenever someone asked, why did he come here, they never gave the same answer. Because truth, like healing, isn't always one story. Sometimes, it's just one person who's willing to sit where no one else will. In the West, we're taught to admire the pure, the perfect, the polished. Clean robes, clean hands, clean reputations. But real compassion, the kind that changes lives, doesn't always look clean. Sometimes it kneels in the mud. Sometimes it sits in brothels. This monk didn't save the women. He didn't rescue them. He didn't fix their lives. He did something harder. He sat with them, fully, openly, without flinching. In a world obsessed with image, he chose presence. In a culture that worships success, he chose stillness. While others avoided the broken, he walked straight into their pain, and stayed. He lost his title, he lost his temple, but he never lost the Dharma, because he never lost love. And maybe that's what the Buddha meant all along. Not to escape the world, but to enter it so deeply, with so much awareness and love, that even suffering begins to transform. The story of the monk who lived in a brothel isn't about scandal. It's about courage. The courage to see divinity where others see disgrace. To sit beside the hurting without needing to fix them. To love without needing to control. That kind of monk may never be accepted in official temples, but he will always be remembered where it matters most, in the hearts of those the world forgot.